Michelle, thank you so much for joining me on Social Impact Power Chats.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily.
So, I would love to just kind of orient us before we talk about what you're doing now, which is really very cool work. Just give us a sense as to how you got into social impact and, brought your career to where it is now.
Yeah, so in some ways, I've actually always been in social impact in some form or another with my career. So, I was studying in the business school in college, and I took a class called Business and Society, which really opened up this kind of whole pathway for me. And through that, I interned with a nonprofit founder. And then right after school, I jumped into doing a Fulbright in Bogota, Colombia. So I was teaching English to university students there for a year. And that was really a transformative experience for me because it showed me the power of connection and just how one person really can make a difference. In that case, it was with my students specifically. And so when I went into that opportunity in Colombia, I had actually deferred a management consulting offer that I had received my senior year. So I kind of came back, jumped into management consulting, but had that experience to kind of tether me to impact work, I guess. And so my intention with going into management consulting was to just learn as much as I could as quickly as possible, climb a really steep learning curve, learn how to build strategies, how to think strategically rather, and communicate with leadership, and then take all of that kind of foundation to the social impact space. And at the time, I didn't know if that was international development work, working at a nonprofit. I think I was really open to what it meant to go into social impact after that. My main client during that time as a management consulting was a Fortune 100 tech company. So I got really interested at the intersection of tech and doing good. And when I was looking for my next role, I was looking for roles at that intersection, which coincidentally, 2.5 years ago, there were a lot of open roles for corporate social impact professionals in tech. And so that's ultimately how I wound up at Fiverr.
Amazing. So you jumped into Fiverr, you helped to kind of originate, right, the social impact team and effort there. Talk to us a little bit about, what social impact looks like at Fiverr and what you've been up to these last few years.
Yeah, so I was the first dedicated social impact hire. So 2.5 years ago, came in, built the social impact strategy. We have three core focus areas for social impact at Fiverr. One is economic opportunity. So that's economic opportunity on both sides of the Fiverr marketplace. So that's underrepresented entrepreneurs on the one side is our focus, and then freelancers on the other side. The second focus area is freelancer well-being, and the third is nonprofit impact. And then that's on the social impact side. I recently stepped into leading community as well. And so social impact has always sat under community at Fiverr, and then we sit under the broader brand marketing team. I always give that context because where you sit within the organization really dictates what role you're doing. And so I got really lucky that I kind of wound up in this area because I really feel like it's where my kind of strengths lie.
Phenomenal. So obviously um, have seen not just at Fiverr, but sort of in the tech ecosystem, how tech companies flex for good. Can you sort of walk us through some typical use cases and what you sort of see as the gateway to good for many of these organizations?
Yeah, I've been really inspired by what I've seen in this space. So, oftentimes, tech companies are extending their product or service at a discount to nonprofits. And then it kind of can flex up from there, right? Building for nonprofits, creating resources for nonprofits. And so, I think when I actually came into the role at Fiverr, my kind of North Star was Twilio and what they've been able to do for social impact organizations and extending their product and kind of the whole unit that they've built out there. So it was always a kind of dream of mine, I guess you could say, to build something similarly for Fiverr, especially really believing in the fact that NGOs and nonprofits can benefit from freelance work. Yeah, I'm excited because that has kind of been our focus the past 6 months is building for nonprofits in that way.
Amazing. So I would love, obviously, there's people who listen to this power chat who are in your chair, who are thinking about building things for their organization. And then there are people on the nonprofit side who are thinking about taking these resources and trying to build out those partnerships. I'd love for you to give some advice, and it can be the same to both, or maybe if you want to say like team A and team B, but what would be your advice about how to set these partnerships up from the beginning to be additive, to be successful? Like, what are your tips that you would give to somebody if you were having a coffee with them right now?
Yeah. So I think for any social impact professional listening, I would say something that I've learned during my time at Fiverr is timing matters a lot. And so, like I said, this is something that I've wanted to do since I've started at Fiverr is building for nonprofits. And it's not something that ever felt like the right timing until recently. And I think with any social impact program, you need the right relationships to make it happen, and to understand like who can I sell this into, where, and how can I position it where it ladders up into their goals as well. And so I think that's what has allowed me to kind of move rather quickly and bring people along the journey, is because I kind of waited 2 years until I had those relationships, and beyond relationships, just an understanding of how the organization works, how things get pushed through, how you maybe can sell through a pilot instead. And I think all of that context is really important for building something from scratch as it relates to social impact at a for-profit company. And then advice I would say for nonprofits, if they're, I mean, the reason why we built the nonprofit hub was we're taking a bet that they can really stand to benefit from freelancers and outsourcing their work. I know nonprofit leaders wear so many hats every single day. They can be grant writing and creating a program plan and approving social media posts all within a couple of hours. And so we are building something that says, take something off your plate. And really, we drink the Kool-Aid at Fiverr. So I'm using freelancers all the time for the work that I do. And that really ranges from, hiring someone one time to turn a voiceover around, for example, within 24 hours. That was something that I just did just this week, actually, to a longer relationship, right? Maybe it's a content strategist that you're brainstorming with on a weekly or monthly basis. I think for me, that's what I like about it, is that there's zero barrier to entry and zero commitment. And that's what we're hoping nonprofit leaders and founders find is helpful as well.
Amazing. We had chatted before and we recorded. And one of the things that I also really appreciate about your specific offering is that it's not bound by any contract, right? You use it when you need it. When you don't, you don't. And I think it takes some of the scariness out of, the engagement for a nonprofit who definitely needs something today, but they may not need something, in January.
Exactly. And that's reflected in the offering too. So we're giving $50 in Fiverr credits to vetted NGOs to start their project whenever they want, zero commitment. So we're excited to build with nonprofits, to get nonprofits trying out freelancers if they're not already. I think what's interesting, we did a research report a couple of months ago and found that a lot of nonprofits actually are contracting work out in some way or another, whether or not it's through a freelancing platform like Fiverr is a different story. But yeah, we know that nonprofits kind of have this need. And yeah, we're excited to see how they're receptive to the platform and how we can continue to build with them in mind.
Amazing. And we've alluded to this project and we'll put it in the show notes, as they say, but can you just tell us like what this is called, where we can find it, who is eligible, like give us like the brass tacks of this new offering and when it launches?
Yeah, so it's actually launching on Giving Tuesday, and it is called Fiverr for Nonprofits. And it's a hub where you can find these exclusive discounts, resources for nonprofits. We have guides, so things like how to fundraise and all of the different methods, how to get incorporated with 501c3 status. We have case studies on there. So yes, it's called Fiverr for Nonprofits, and we're vetting with an organization called Goodstack.
Amazing. And anybody with a nonprofit EIN is eligible, right? It doesn't matter size. As long as you're a US based EIN, you're set.
It's actually global. Yeah. So you
Amazing.
don't even have to be US based. Yep.
Incredible. Okay, great. So that is all incredible. We are thinking about kind of end of year reports and like if again, kind of going back to this advice, what are some ways that you've seen organizations, whether it's a nonprofit or even frankly a social impact team that's nimble and needs some extra elbow grease? Like, what are some things that you've seen people be able to effectively, bring other vendors on to support? Like, what would be like your like riddle off like the top 10 reasons somebody would engage a freelancer, Fiverr or otherwise, and like maybe people will think about it in a different way than they had before.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of what we've seen is one, social media strategy, social media content. So, for example, I was chatting with a nonprofit founder. Her nonprofit is 10 years old. I would say she's small to medium sized nonprofit based in the US, doing a lot of great work, really at a pivotal moment strategically where she's hit 10 years and now she's kind of thinking about systems change and how her organization slots into that. And her marketing team, her marketing person rather, left. And so she was left with this gap where she really needed someone to come in, understand her nonprofit very quickly, and be able to build a social media strategy, content strategy for how she can engage these new donors. And so that's an example of how she used Fiverr. What's also interesting to think about is that the freelancers on Fiverr are from anywhere in the world, right? So for someone like her, for example, she's a nonprofit based in the US, but she's specifically building schools in rural Central America. So she had a more technical gap where she needed someone to create the UX for her app. So she's building an app currently. And she wanted a Guatemalan UX designer, and she was able to find that on the platform. But even when you think about building for the needs in communities where maybe you're not based, that's really an opportunity to engage freelancers that are on the ground in those kind of target areas where you're intending to have impact.
Brilliant. So, now like zooming out from this specific effort and just thinking more broadly about you, your career and social impact, what you've built, any other advice or, sort of perspective that you would want to share with listeners that you think would be helpful as they're thinking about their own teams, their own careers?
Yeah, in terms of people interested in getting into the social impact career, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, is just understanding if you're specifically interested in corporate social impact, is understanding where the role you're looking at sits within the organization, right? So you can be a social impact person. My title was very vague when I joined Fiverr, for example. I was social impact manager. That could have meant that I sat under the legal team and I was working on, ESG reports. It could have meant that I sat under HR and I was doing foundation, donation, volunteering work. And that's why I say I got lucky, is that I really had no concept of how different this role could look. And I also think if you're interested in getting into social impact, really think about what your core strengths are and how you can bring that to a purpose driven organization, right? Like you don't need a role that focuses solely on social impact like mine. You could be a software engineer and you want to work at a B Corp, and maybe that kind of scratches that itch, I guess. But yeah, that's something I always tell people as well.
Amazing. Such sage advice. So, power chats go quick. We're already at our last question, which is you've got a crystal ball, you're looking into the future of impact. What do you see coming down the field, and what are you looking for in terms of future trends and things that you're thinking about as you keep building your career and, this piece of your organization?
Yeah, I really think the key to social impact in the future is moving it closer to business goals. And I think the companies that thrive in the future are going to be those that approach social impact not just as an add on, but as a competitive advantage, especially when you look at the younger generations and how they look at brands, their expectations for brands and organizations that they want to work for, right? So both as like prospective employees and as consumers, I think there is pressure like there never has been before for organizations to be socially conscious at a minimum and at a maximum contributing change in some way in the world. And so I think that has been the approach that I've taken at Fiverr, is how can we bring social impact closer to business goals, whether that's how we approach a project or whether that's kind of pushing the perspective in a meeting that has maybe seemingly nothing to do with social impact, right? It's just about integrating it into different decisions and different rooms, I guess.
Amazing. Well, so much just great information and opportunities to pick up from this chat. I really appreciate your time and look forward to seeing how this project takes off and all of the nonprofits that benefit from the platform.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Emily.